Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today I am here with fourth year human bio and genome bio double major student Haadiya Usman. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I moved to Michigan when I was 1 with my parents because they were doing their master's and their PhD at MSU. And then when I was in second grade, we moved back to Pakistan. No one wants to move to Pakistan, that's the thing. The summer before 7th grade, I was like, I want to donate my hair. And so when I went to school, I got bullied. They were like, oh my God, you're bald. So I proposed the idea of an anti-bullying club. For me personally, I would be more upset if it was coming from a girl.
For guys, a lot of us are just like, move on with it. It's not that serious. Stop being a wimp.
I don't think it's only the responsibility of the victim. I think it's also instilling in people who might be bullies why you should not bully. I had gotten out of a toxic relationship that definitely took a toll on me and my self-image. In the healing process, it was almost like a character reset.
The top 5 concerns amongst voters. Number 1 was inflation and prices. Number 2 was immigration. Number 3 was healthcare. Number 4 was jobs in the economy. And number 5 was abortion. I want to kind of go through these and see what your thoughts on them are. We can have a mini Haadiya presidential interview here. I want to see what you would say to these things. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the VoV podcast, Voices of Vic. Today I am here with fourth year human bio and genome bio double major student. I also got an IM minor in there, which I'll ask you about. Haadiya Usman, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You applied in the summer, which I'm super grateful for. Just at the end of last year, we could have almost had you on last year, pushed it down to this year. Thank you still for being interested.
Yeah, I when I got a text from you saying oh, we're going to do it in September, I was like, oh, what if he forgets?
Nope, not at all. We're here.
Yeah.
We're ready to go. So a question I always ask double major students, because I'm taking a major in econ and then double minor. Mm-hmm. But students who do double major, that's another thing. You're doing double major and a minor. You didn't need to take the minor, but you just did it anyways. That's impressive. Which do you identify more with, human bio or genome bio? Which do you like more?
Human bio.
Human bio?
100%. I don't want to say this, but I don't like genome bio.
Really?
Yeah, I don't.
Why are you taking it?
Honestly, my dad told me that genetics was a good. It is a good major to have, especially for if you want to go into biotech. But I'm not so sure I want to go into biotech anymore. At the start of undergrad, I definitely did. Yeah. That was my college application. I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna be a biotech startup founder. Yeah. But not anymore. Yeah.
What happened?
So I think I just realized that it wasn't really my cup of tea. I didn't really understand it. I didn't vibe with it. So in first year, I was like, I'm going to go to pharmacy school because my roommate was in pharmacy school. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That looks interesting. Yep. And then I did Chem 136 and I decided, you know what? Pharmacy school is not for me. Right. And so then second year, I was like veterinary school because I really like animals. And I would totally do that. I've volunteered at a veterinary clinic. So I know what it's like. But I went to an academic advisor. I was like, should I switch over to animal physiology as one of my majors? Just because veterinary school is really, really competitive in Canada. Mm-hmm. I think there's only 5 schools in Canada that accept international students. And I'm an international student. Yep. And one of which, OVC at Guelph, only accepts 1 international student.
Damn. Yeah.
So I was like, should I switch over? And they were like, have you considered just leaving Canada? Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. So
that's tough.
I think I kind of moved on from that. But I've decided now I want to pivot and go to law school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So with law school, that's something that I've at points throughout university have been interested in. I don't know if it's necessarily meant for me. That's a tough, the kind of path to go down in terms of just it's very strenuous. There's a lot of reading to do. It's but it's absolutely a respectable job. How will law school applications look with this life science background? Have you been thinking about that, where it's like, oh, I don't know if it's going to be the easiest thing to try to pivot into?
Yeah, I have thought about it because I've gotten a lot of mixed reactions when I tell people. Whenever I tell someone I'm in life science, they're like, oh, pre-med? I'm like, no. Pre-law. if anything, I feel like because it's a unique background, that'll set me aside from other applicants. But I don't know. I guess we'll see. The main thing is, so I know this is going to come up, so I'll just bring it up now. WICSA, so I'm on the Woodsworth College Students Association. This year I'm the president, but last year in my third year, I was the equity commissioner.
Yeah.
And so I think doing that work made me realize that I really like equity work.
Yeah.
So I do want to stay in healthcare, but I just kind of want to like be in a different field, if that makes sense. So equity work in healthcare.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know this about you wanting to go into law, so that's something that is super interesting. I'm going to ask you also about all the different countries you've studied in. I don't understand what, like, so I'll just list them off. Saudi Arabia, Canada, US, you mentioned Michigan, and then did you study in Pakistan too?
I did. Yeah.
You did? Okay. And when, like, maybe let's just do that now. Let's do that now. How do you bounce around from 4 countries and end up in Canada?
Okay, so to start off, I moved to Michigan when I was 1 with my parents because they were doing their master's and their PhD at MSU. And so we stayed there for a good chunk of time. And then when I was in 2nd grade, we moved back to Pakistan for my dad's job. And so I was pretty young, so I didn't 100% understand why we were moving.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, we're going back. So I did 3rd grade and half of 4th grade in Pakistan. Then me and my mom moved back to Michigan so that she could do her PhD.
Okay.
So me and my mom were in were in Michigan for the rest of 4th grade, and I did 5th grade in Michigan too. And then we both moved back to Pakistan as well. And then me, my mom, my dad were in Pakistan. I finished 6th and 7th grade there. And then my dad and I moved to Saudi Arabia. And then I just completed high school there, and
Wow.
I'm here for university.
Which country was the toughest to learn in?
To learn in?
Yeah.
Michigan and Pakistan were tied. So US and Pakistan were tied.
Yeah. Interesting. What about it?
Well, why?
Yeah.
I don't think I really...
Was it the actual academics, or was it more the culture, like the social culture around school?
I think in Michigan it was both. I don't think I really vibed well with the way that they would teach.
Got it.
From what I remember, I don't think I really understood why we were learning the concepts that we were learning, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then Pakistan, it was the complete opposite. It was like all memorization based. So,
Interesting.
I am not a very good memorizer either, so that didn't work. But then Saudi Arabia, and this is important to know, I went to a British school, so not a Saudi school.
Yeah.
And the British system, I get along great with. I loved it. I did really well there.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's interesting because I had a friend I was talking to. Both of us don't drink, and we were explaining what do you think was the reason that, or like don't drink, don't do drugs, this type of thing. His parents barely mentioned drinking or drugs. Like, it wasn't like don't do drugs, don't drink. Like, they just didn't talk about it, so it was just kind of left in the background. It's like, if you want to drink, you can drink. Like, it's up to you. You're in high school, it's your choice, whatever. Whereas my parents were more like, no, like stay away from it, blah, blah, blah. But both of us ended up not doing it. So it's interesting to think about like kids, like you hear stories about kids who have the strict parents and they're like the worst with drugs and alcohol because they want to kind of break the rules. Mm-hmm. So in this context, we're talking about education with school. I remember growing up and a bunch of the kids not wanting to learn the stuff because they had no reason to actually learn it other than the teacher saying, here, do this work. They were more like, why? Why do I need to do it? What's the reason? How is this going to help me in the future? This doesn't matter in real life. I don't need to learn about photosynthesis or whatever they were talking about, right? So I think telling maybe in school, teaching kids the importance of certain subjects, like we would talk about it in grade 7. We're like, what are actually the most important subjects? And English got brought up a lot because, reading, writing, speaking even is important. And then math in terms of finances. And then the other stuff was a little bit more gray area. So maybe in the context of university even, like, do you think that you would think that at this point people are studying things that they're actually going to end up using in real life, but it seems like some students still are in a bit of a gray area, like they don't know exactly what they want for the future. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fairly normal in university, especially in undergrad, to not 100% know what you want to do in the future. But from the people that I know, I think most people are pretty clear now.
Yeah.
At the start of high school, or at the start of university, they had no idea. I have a friend who switched over from like Rotman to, no, they started in life science, then I think they went into like humanities, and then they went into Rotman, and now.
That's a crazy transition.
Yeah. But I would say it's pretty normal, nothing to be ashamed of. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I was originally trying to go into, actuarial sciences, and then I took Math 137 and it kicked my ass.
Ooh, I've
so
heard
that's
things about Math 137.
Yeah, that's a quick switch for me into economics, which is a little bit better. But yeah, let's talk about Woodsworth College Students Association. On the form, I had equity commissioner, but you've just told me that you're now the president of the Students Association. Why did you start getting into it? I know that you did some work in your high school even before. We can talk about that. Maybe your earliest days of, like, I don't know, student government or student advocacy, for example. And then eventually maybe that built an interest for you. I'll ask you about that. Let's just start with high school. Okay. How was that experience? There's you started a club, is it? Like the anti-bully, is it a club?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do you one better. I won't start in high school. I'll start in middle school.
Let's go.
So I think, I was in 7th grade.
Yep.
Just the summer before 7th grade, I was like, I want to donate my hair for cancer wigs. And I had really long hair, and I cut it down to like maybe about here.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when I went to school, I got bullied, especially by the older kids. They were like, "Oh my God, you're bald."
Yeah.
I didn't take it to heart at all. But they're mean words, but I didn't really care. But at the same time, there was another kid in my class who was being bullied, and no one had any idea. And everyone sort of realized when he left the school. So it got so bad that he had to leave. And I heard that he was sitting in the principal's office with his mom, and like he was crying, and admin didn't do anything about this. And this was in Pakistan, by the way. So I told my mom when I heard about this, and she was like, "You should do something about it." That's kind of my mom's reaction to everything I say. She's like, "You should do something about it."
Yeah.
I'll be like, "Yeah, world hunger. You should do something about it."
Figure it out, Haadiya.
Yeah. I mean, it worked out in the end.
No, it's a good saying. I like that saying.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, this time I'll take my mom's advice. I'll actually do something about it.
Nice.
So I proposed the idea of an anti-bullying club.
Yeah.
That did give me a great nickname, Dork. But
damn.
But yeah, it was
the older kids doubled down.
Yeah. But it was really fulfilling. So I started it in that school in Pakistan. I was in 7th grade. I wasn't gonna be like the best at leading a team, so it was kind of all over the place. But eventually I moved from that school and I went to my school in Saudi. I ran for student council when I was in year 9, which is grade 8. So I lost, but I didn't want to only get involved in the community with a title. I was like, I can be involved, I can make a difference, even without that title of like president of the student council. So again, I proposed this idea to my new school, and they were very, very supportive. And actually, I'm here now. I'm in my 4th year. I started that when I was in 9th grade, I said, yeah. And it's still running. Wow. And it's developed like a lot. So that it's just really nice to see. So that was sort of the start, and that basically, like we weren't police walking around the school, right?
Yeah, like what did the club do?
So if someone was being bullied or was even struggling with something like mental health, or just like they were struggling academically, they could come to ambassadors who they could just talk to. Now, we weren't trained to give advice. We weren't therapists. But it was just someone to talk to, because like back then, you'd get called a snitch if you went to a teacher. Like, I'm getting bullied. So it was just an easier way for students to connect and to kind of talk about what they were facing. Yeah, and then over the years, towards the end of high school, it developed into something more. So it became like well-being. We also had like tutoring. So we would pair up upper year students with the students just starting off high school. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's cool. What were like the most common issues that students would come to you with? Like, I'm trying to think today, maybe the issues would be a little bit different than they were back then in high school, but who knows? Maybe not. Like, you tell me, like what were the main things? Was it like physical, verbal, something else? What was it?
It was both.
Yeah.
And it was actually really shocking when we would get a student, because I feel like bullying is so under the table sometimes. You don't know when it's happening. And
As the victim or like the bystander?
as like a bystander.
Okay.
Like, I would say that school was probably one of the most like welcoming, inclusive, and like positive schools that I've been to. I've been to a lot of schools, so that's saying something.
Yeah.
But even there were like some awful cases, both like verbal and physical. Like someone's phone got flushed down a toilet, and they were like, I thought that kind of stuff only happened in like cartoons.
Yeah, yeah, High School Musical.
Yeah. Yeah, so that kind of stuff, basically.
Interesting.
A lot of like online harassment too, because we all had phones.
That's a new thing, yeah. That's a good point. Like, new thing in terms of back then, maybe it was a little bit newer. Like, obviously now people talk about that a lot. Another thing I want to talk about. So that was in Pakistan? That was in Saudi Arabia?
So it started off in Pakistan, and then, yeah.
Got it. Okay. So now your experience here, I don't know if you would say bullying would be more prevalent in high school than it is in university, perhaps. That's maybe my perception. I don't know what you think, but what do you think about the comparison between bullying and harassment in like the East, in Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, versus here in North America? Like, is the culture different? Are the bullies different, or is it a lot of the same stuff?
That's a good question. I would say it's different. I'm not entirely sure how, but I think in Saudi, at least in my school, it was like a power dynamic.
Yeah.
So students maybe from like more well-off backgrounds, or from certain ethnicities were more inclined to pick on students from, who might be immigrants, or from like lower income households. I'm not sure what it is over here, but I imagine that happens here too. So when I was in Michigan, I got bullied there too, in elementary school, and it was so stupid. It was just because I had like hair on my arms and on my legs. So the first day that I wore shorts to school, the girls in my class were like, "Oh, you have hair."
The girls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the guys, they were like, "Oh, you have a mustache," and I was like, "Well, at least I can grow one, you know?"
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Shit on. How? That's the thing. Girls can be feisty. Like, as a girl, do you think it's worse? Like the bullying, like I'm not assuming your personal experience, but for girls in general, is it worse coming from girls or boys? Like, I feel like it's a little bit different. Like the kind of hit that you take when that happens.
For me personally, I would be more upset if it was coming from a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't care what a man says, but
There you go. Girl boss.
yeah, if it was a girl, I'd actually feel something. I'd feel upset. I'd feel hurt.
Yeah.
I might even feel like a little bit of guilt if I feel like, oh, did I do something to upset this person? Or
Yeah.
I'm also more likely to like reach out to the girl and be like, hey, is everything okay?
Yeah. Interesting. So another thing I noticed as you were telling this story, you bring up you're getting bullied in Michigan. You're laughing and smiling as you tell the story. How did you deal with it? How did you help other students deal with it? Is it like positivity? Is it just like, I'm not letting this bother me. You can go F yourself. I'm having a great day. Or like, how would you cope? How'd you help these people?
That's actually funny that you pointed that out.
Yeah.
I think I do that a lot. Whenever it's like an uncomfortable or like that kind of story, I'll like laugh a little bit. But it's just, I mean, like I said, we weren't therapists. We would never give advice, but the main thing was that we would listen. And I think by the end of it, everyone was kind of just like talking about something else, and like we'd shift the conversation, and it would be something more positive.
Got it.
So yeah, in a way, I try to shift the focus to something else that they should be either looking forward to, or that they should be happy about. So not focusing too much on the negative feelings. It is important to like feel those feelings, but I just wanted to shift the focus, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. You think that maybe, sometimes people just need to be heard. You know what I mean? And that's something that maybe I personally have taken for granted, because like a lot of any sort of issues that I would have, I wouldn't say I was ever necessarily bullied. That's another thing we can talk about like each individual's kind of characterization of bullying. Like maybe if someone's threshold for being, like let's say someone comes home from school, they were getting picked on, they say, yeah, I got picked on at school, go to the next day. And then another kid, same situation, comes home and says, yeah, I was being bullied. Do you think like people might be able to play it differently in their heads to affect them more? Like if someone takes a hurtful comment and just kind of brushes it off, is that like a technique to cope with it? Or do you think that's like, it doesn't really happen that way? I that's just something that I think about.
No, I definitely think it could be a coping mechanism. I'll give you another story.
Yeah.
In elementary school, I was coming back home. I got off the bus. I was like 10 meters away from my front door. And then two guys came out of the bushes, one with a phone. He was recording. And the other
like an
one,
iPhone?
Huh?
iPhone, like a...
It was an iPod. It was
Okay,
an iPod,
okay,
yeah.
yeah.
We were in 5th grade, so. only
Okay,
iPods,
okay.
And then the other one comes out, and he is like, I'm going to beat you up. I was 12. And
Two boys did this?
two boys, and one was older. And I'll tell you the reason why. Not that it justifies it at all, but yeah, so older one kicks me in the shin, and I'm just like, I was so confused. I froze. I did taekwondo for so long. I could have whipped something out at that time, and I didn't.
Yeah.
I was just like, what's happening?
Yeah.
And then I skipped home. I didn't walk home. I didn't run home. I skipped home.
Nice.
And then as soon as I got in, I locked the door behind me, and I was just frozen. And so the reason why he did this was because in the morning, in the bus line, I accidentally stepped on his shoe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I guess, yeah, me skipping home, coping mechanism. As soon as I was like behind closed doors, I knew I was safe. I was like, oh my God, what just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's so weird. Kids are like, they aren't taught the things, and it's like the bare bones of like human evolution sometimes, I feel, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's ruthless. Just randomly kicks you in the shin. Where'd that video go? Let's make a clip out of that. That's messed up.
They circulated it on Kick.
Oh, Kick.
Yeah,
Classic.
Kick, yeah.
I never used that, but I had friends who had Kick all the time. That's funny. Yeah, no, that's interesting. What else was I going to mention? Bullying, anti-bullying. Yeah, that's an interesting experience. So now with WCSA, that experience you have with fostering like this kind of, I guess, group, like the people who would sign up to be a part of that club, was it like, I'd have to think just like mostly empathetic people, right? In terms of like, what was the gender split like? Because I know like for guys, a lot of us are just like, yo, like move on with it. Like it's not that serious. Stop being a wimp. Whereas girls, it's a lot like talking about it, and that helps them heal. And I don't think either is necessarily like, I don't think either are bad. I think like it's good that girls have that style and guys like kind of tough love, like deal with it. But like the people signing up for this club, was it mainly girls? Was it a mix of both? What was it?
Fortunately, it was both.
It was both.
And we tried to get a range of students from different years. So we didn't want someone from like year 7 talking to like a year 12, because that also kind of defeats the purpose of like talking to a student. There's a huge age gap. So we tried to get like 2-3 people from each class, and it was both. It was pretty much a 50-50 split, I would say, at least when I was there. I don't know what it's like now.
Nice.
But everyone went through the same like training. So we would do a training with the counselor, and then we also did an online training, and then you could be like an ambassador.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. Last question about the club, and then we can move on to other topics. I don't mean to stay on this the whole time, but it is interesting. With helping students kind of deal with these issues, I think a lot. So like what I'm hearing right now is a lot of, if something bad happens, you come to us and we'll talk it out. It'll be okay. We'll figure things out from there. Preventative measures, let's say. How do you stop kids from getting bullied in the first place? Is it like, for me, my dad, there's a few like short sayings he would tell me as a kid to kind of like, I guess, get me ready for the brutal world of elementary school. And one of them was never punch first. And it was an interesting line because it was not like, never punch first doesn't mean don't punch ever. It just means don't instigate and don't start a fight where one isn't needed. And that was the kind of thing that like helped me with the type of kids who would try to, you know, push you around. It wasn't necessarily like, I can't do anything. I'm getting beat up on. It's like, if you touch me, I'm going to swing at your head, Thomas. Shout out to my boy, Thomas. That was the kid that I have beef with in grade 3. But I was like, yeah, you touched me. I'm going to return the exact same with double the force. So watch out. And obviously, like, I'm not saying that like we should necessarily encourage violence in that sense, but it's more like being able to, you know, stand up for yourself before someone comes at you, instead of necessarily having no protection, having no like shield, you know what I mean? So a lot of it also, in my opinion, nowadays, like needs to do with toughening kids up in a sense, not necessarily to make them like hard and like non-sensitive and non-emotional and just like cold stone face, but like knowing, you know, as we're going to talk about eventually here, self-confidence, self-respect, self-love, that kind of thing, where it's like, I am not going to let you push me around like this. Like what, because characteristically, as I think about like the stereotypical bully in elementary school and the kid who's being bullied, size difference a lot of the time, bigger kids picking on smaller kids. As you talked about in Pakistan, there's like class issues where kids from better off households bullying on the poorer kids. There's a bunch of other things like looks, like kids can pick on anything. But like what can you equip people with, especially those people who are more likely to get picked on, to be able to say like back off, basically?
I think you pretty much covered what I would say in terms of like self-confidence. I think that's really key. My mom, whenever I would tell her like, oh, there's this girl who's, you know, either picking on me or being mean to me, she'd just say, well, she's just jealous.
Yeah.
I had one of those moms. It's either like you have a mom who's like, yeah, they're just jealous, or then a mom who's like, oh, well, maybe you did something, right? Maybe you did something to upset them. But yeah, I feel like, and like you said, not showing emotion isn't the solution. Pretending like you aren't affected at all, I don't think that's the solution. I wouldn't want like my future kid to, you know, just if they're getting bullied, they're just, you know, yeah, I don't know, just working on self-confidence. And then I don't think it's only like the responsibility of the victim. I think it's also instilling in people who might be bullies why you should not bully. But we do already have so many of those talks, like anti-bullying talk that you have in school, the standard one. But that doesn't always like solve the problem. But I think it's like responsibility of both parties.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's an interesting conversation to have too. Like, and like super controversial topic that revolves around this like kind of blaming the victim thing are situations of like sexual assault, where you hear a lot when someone gets sexual assault, people are asking like, oh, where was she? Like, was she at this part? What was she wearing? That kind of thing. And it's like, in terms of this like bullying situation, let's take stealing as an example. There's two strategies to go. It's like encouraging in society for people to not steal, and teaching people in society how to lock up their stores to not get stolen from. It's very interesting because I believe in a more individualistic approach. Obviously, I'm never stealing. You don't need to worry about me. I'm not robbing your store. Don't worry. I need to figure out how to lock my shit up. I need to figure out, there are bad people out there. There are people like, who knows if we're like going to be able to convince all the bad guys to not be bad. I want to figure out how to protect my kid from not being bullied, instead of going to the bullier and being like, please leave my kid alone. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. Like for me, definitely, I don't know how to like push, like, I don't know, like, okay, with the bullies, let's stay on the bullies. With the bullies, do you think that they are, like, what makes someone bully other kids? That's a good question to ask. Like, are they, I wouldn't say they're inherently bad. I think everyone's born good, but something about them makes them pick on people.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, you're right. Like, no one's 100% good. No one's 100% bad. I think usually bullies come from like experiencing adverse conditions themselves. Maybe something happens at home. Maybe they were bullied themselves. I think that's usually what we're taught, that, oh, if someone's bullying you, it's because they're going through things at home, or they're being bullied themselves, or they're super insecure themselves. So I think probably most of the times that I've actually heard about someone, you know, bullying someone or picking on someone else, or just being mean, you know, it's either like their parents got divorced, or like, I don't know, they're moving, or they had a huge fight with their friend, or they're just going through some like personal struggle. But I kind of wanted to go back to like what you said about, you know, who the responsibility sort of falls on. I just want to clarify that I don't think that the action of being bullied, like that responsibility falls on the victim. I think that is entirely on the bully, but the steps that you take, like the precautionary measures, those are just to prevent any like consequences to yourself, or to prevent like those feelings after, like feeling sad, feeling like you weren't good enough, that sort of thing. So yeah.
Awesome.
That made sense. Yeah.
We'll get right back to it. We'll take a quick 5-minute break, let the cameras cool down, and then jump back in.
Okay.
Back at it after a short break.
Can I give a disclaimer?
Yes.
Okay, so I feel like I sound very nasally right now. I think orientation did that, and I also can't hear out of this ear right now.
Yeah.
Also because of orientation, so this isn't what I sound like. Yeah.
You must have planned an awesome orientation then.
Yeah, it was.
How much work was that? You did that over the summer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just me. It was so we have orientation coordinators. They are the masterminds behind orientation, and then we have an orientation executive committee, so the OEC, and they basically support the OCs in planning. And then we have the orientation management committee, which is primarily members of the board, and we provide oversight, and we just support throughout the summer and throughout O week. So I am present, so I was on the OMC.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Shout out to all of you beauties that set up that's the Woodsworth orientation?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. So that's cool. We were talking about, yes, the responsibility falls on the bully, absolutely 100%. And they were also talking about how do you take measures to protect the victims before anything happens. Self-confidence was the main thing we were talking about. Let's dive deeper into that. Like, that's something that I didn't necessarily have a ton when I was a kid. Like, I feel like a lot of U of T students might be able to relate a little bit, you know, going to a great school, and typically the people that were good at school were a little bit, as you said, dorky, nerdy. Not, you didn't call them that, but you said people called you that.
Yeah.
And And yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would be able to relate to that. But, you know, as you grow older, as you kind of mature, you realize, oh, okay, I'm not actually like, I deserve to be confident. I deserve to kind of, you know, stand up and speak how I want to speak and act how I want to act. I don't need to please anybody. What was the moment for you that kind of clicked and you kind of gained some self-confidence? Was it like, was there a moment? Was it more progressive? How was it?
I think there were probably multiple moments throughout the years. And I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people, but I think because I moved around so much and because I was like integrating into different communities, I kind of had to like rebuild each time almost. But I think the most recent example was summer of second year, or just at the end of the winter semester, second year. I had gotten out of a toxic relationship. It was a narcissistic abusive relationship, and that definitely took a toll on me and my self-image and self-confidence. So in the healing process, I think that it was almost like a character reset. I don't want to say that I'm really glad that it happened because it's unfortunate that it happened, but what came after, I really needed that healing, because it's brought me to where I am now, and I'm very happy with the person I am.
Absolutely. Pain is like, when you look back on pain, it's always a lot of the time in a positive light for people. Not if it was like something like drastically like life altering and like I don't know, like a family member died. I don't know, but most of the time, if you're lucky, people do grow from pain, and people look back on it and say that was a crucial part to developing me into the person I am now. But sorry, just to rewind, I don't know how personal you want to get with it. What is a narcissistic abuse relationship? Just for people who don't know, I'm also like, I don't know exactly what that term is.
Yeah, so it's when you're in a relationship with a narcissist or someone with narcissistic personality disorder. And essentially it's just a very manipulative, very toxic relationship. There's a lot of like terms that I could throw around. So at the beginning, there's a lot of love bombing. So they essentially try to mirror the type of person you are. And they tell you how great you are and that they love you very, very early on. And it's sort of, you get bonded to them. And then over the months, they start breadcrumbing you. So for example, let's say at the beginning, they're starting off with like 100% affection. And then one random day, bring it down to like 90%. And you're like, oh, like there's a little decrease. But then they'll bring it up to 95 and you're happy because it's like increased a little bit, right? But then next time they'll bring it down to like, you know, like 70. And then when you make up, they bring it up to like 75. And just as you go along, it dwindles down to absolutely nothing. And you're happy with the bare minimum. So that's sort of like my experience. And it usually happens over the course of months, years. But it's a very like long process, and it's very, very difficult to get out of. That's
got to be hard to catch too, like if it's over a longer time period, you know what I mean? Like what would you say for people to be able to kind of detect that? Because if something happens, like I'm trying to think of like how to just like realistically help someone in that situation. If something happens where you drop from 100, like you said, you're at 100, you drop to 80, and then it goes up to 90, like does that like instantly a signal for like narcissistic abuse relationship, breakup right away? You don't want to go, eventually it's going to lead you to zero? Or is it like, where is the point where you're like, I should probably back up?
I think the first sign would be really early on in the relationship. If they are immediately like just stuck to you like glue, and want to spend all their time. I mean, yeah, when you get into a relationship, you do want to spend a lot of time with your partner, but you do have to draw a line. You do have to have like boundaries. You can't change your life too much for a person, especially one that you've just met. So I think that would be the first sign, like even before getting into a relationship or just at the very start. But it's hard. It's hard to identify like and to differentiate between just a very, very affectionate person and someone who might be, and then I guess you could look at like arguments and fights, how conflict resolution goes. yeah.
What is your experience with that? What do you think about like fighting in relationships? Because in my first relationship, there was like never any fighting at all. Like, and we were together for a decent amount of time, like 3 years we were together, and like I can't even think of a fight that we had. Whereas in my relationship now, coming up on 3 years as well, there's more conflict, there's more back and forth, but like we resolve the issues. It's not like things end on like a terrible note. It's not like we're insulting each other or anything of that nature, but there's more. I think it's necessary if you're truly looking out for like the long term of the relationship, because if you're dating to marry, if you're dating to, you know, eventually have a wife or a husband, then you don't want these issues to kind of sprout up later. And it's like, let's deal with it now, because if we're 10 years in and we realize, oh, this is something that's like a deal breaker, then we're actually screwed. So I think that's why I've kind of learned that like let's figure out everything we disagree on and either come to a middle ground, agree to disagree, that type of thing. Like, how do you think about conflict and like arguments in relationships?
They're 100% normal, and I think what you said was really important about how you guys in your current relationship, you never insult each other during a fight. Disrespecting your partner is never okay. Whether that's in a fight or like a huge conflict, never okay. Yeah. You can have feelings, you can be angry, you can be upset, but your behavior, you have control over that. So that would never be okay. So I think a good relationship isn't defined by, you know, how much or how little you fight. It's about how you resolve those conflicts.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. That's sweet. That's cool. Yeah. It's interesting you bring up about respect, like how you don't disrespect your partner. I was always, maybe not always, but I've been kind of taught recently in relationships with your girlfriend, you need to show her love. Absolutely. That's what she's looking for. She's looking to be, you know, taken care of emotionally, you know, physically, all this type of thing. Well-being is number one priority. And once that box is kind of checked off, once you've kind of figured out how to do that, then you have to show her respect, honor her. You know, don't be an asshole, don't insult when you're having arguments. Whereas with men, it tends to be the opposite order. Respect oftentimes comes first, and then once a woman has that box checked off, then comes the love. So I've heard, and I even know this in my relationship, is that if a woman is loving her man but disrespecting him, it still doesn't work out, because men look for the respect first and then comes the love, whereas the women look for the love first. It's not like you can disrespect your woman. This is a problem that I think a lot of men have. They think because women only care about love that it's okay to be disrespectful, which is not the case. Whereas men, same thing. It's not like you can't be loving to your man, but it's the respect that they're looking for first. They want to, you know, feel like the guy in her world. So it's an interesting thing to think about, that you have to really manage both.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I see your point, because you could care for your partner, you could genuinely care for them, but if you're, like, let's say in a group setting and you call your partner an idiot, that is disrespectful.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I think about like the flip side, like about how women want. I would want to be respected first. First? Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like a drop down like checklist. I would want both, you know, affection and respect, kind of like simultaneously. But I guess if I had to choose, I would want to be respected first, because respect encapsulates a lot. It could mean respecting like boundaries. If someone's not respecting my boundaries, why would I want to get into a relationship with them, you know? True. Yeah. True.
When you say boundaries, like what do you mean? Like what are some boundaries that you're like, don't text me all the time? Is that what you're looking for? Is it just personal space? What do you want?
Yeah, like I mean, it could be like maybe early, and boundaries change over the course of a relationship. Like maybe at the start it's like a physical touch thing. Maybe you don't want to be super intimate with your partner at the very beginning. And maybe that changes later. But I don't think it's just things like physical touch or like texting. It could be like conversation topics. Maybe you're not comfortable sharing those with your partner yet. Just kind of respecting your partner's boundaries, like all across the board.
Interesting. When it comes to, as I was mentioning, when it comes to like long-term building relationships, I'm trying to think of the main things that I look for, like the key, like I know you said like you don't think of it as a drop-down list, but I think of like boxes that I like want to check off to like make sure I don't get into later issues. And a lot of it comes down to like values and like that's the main thing, which is like maybe like I feel like some girls might find that upsetting, where it's like maybe they rather you care about their personality instead of their values. But for me, like if we're good on values, like if we agree on, I had a girl ask me this before, family member. She's like do me and my boyfriend need to agree on politics? Because he's more conservative. She's not necessarily not conservative, but less conservative than he is. They disagree on some things. And I said, you don't need to agree on all of politics. Like some stuff is irrelevant. Like you don't need to agree on the Ukraine-Russia war. That doesn't really affect your relationship or the way you bring up a household. But the certain political issues that affect a family, you should maybe be aligned on. Because like if your kid comes to you and says, if your daughter comes to you, for example, let's say abortion is the issue and something happens, accident, she gets pregnant, comes to the parents, can I have an abortion? If the dad's saying one thing, the mom's saying another thing, the kid doesn't know what to do. There's kind of that issue. It's important, I think, for the parents to be aligned on that before getting into marriage. You know what I mean?
There's like a lot of like intersectionality in politics. So I wouldn't say that politics itself, like you have to support the same like presidential candidate. But things like abortion, things like human rights, those are values which I would they kind of
transcend politics in a way.
I would consider like if there was a huge difference, those would probably be deal breakers for me in a relationship.
Yeah, that's fair. You bring up the U.S. presidential, candidate. Tomorrow's the debate. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, to be honest, I didn't. I didn't keep up.
That's fair. That's fair.
I should.
No, I mean it's not this country, so I mean they do. I guess they do have a lot of power in their neighbors, but that's life. You mentioned this is in the summer application. I don't know if you still think about this much, but social justice issues are a thing that you are interested in, I don't know how much you involve yourself with different topics. I don't know what topics you're interested in mostly. Maybe I'll ask you that. Like do you involve yourself in like specific things relating to social justice? Or?
I am probably like reproductive rights, human rights, animal welfare, environmentalism,
nice.
Volunteering, all of those things. Yeah,
that's good.
A little bit of everything. Yeah.
Okay, so before we started here, I was looking up what are the biggest, I guess, social issues that people are considering. This is in the American setup because their election is coming up, and the top five that this statistics kind of poll, I think it was Statista. I don't know if you've heard of that. Anyways, they ran a poll that they got the top five like concerns amongst voters, and they were number one was inflation and prices. Number two was immigration. Number three was healthcare. Number four was jobs in the economy, and number five was abortion. So reproductive rights, as you said. I don't know, like I want to kind of go through these and see what your thoughts on them are. We can have a mini Haadiya presidential interview here. If you were going to go on the debate tomorrow and be the third candidate and telling Trump and Kamala where they can go stick it, Haadiya for president, I want to see what you would say to these things. Okay. Because how long were you in the U.S. for?
It was a bit of back and forth. I want to say 7 to 8 years.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you've been around. You've embraced, or at least you've immersed yourself in the culture. Yeah, inflation and prices. Do you think about that at all? We're in university. The price of education definitely has gone up in the past.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm an international student. I pay
Yep.
international fees,
Yep.
unfortunately. My parents, they've told me this, that so they get their salary in, my dad's in Dubai right now, so in dirhams, and then my mom's in Pakistani rupees. So the exchange rate of the Pakistani rupee is really, really bad now.
Oh, wow.
So at the start of university, they had set aside like a certain amount of money, and they were like, yeah, this should cover all 4 years.
Yeah.
By the end of second year, that money it only covered the first 2 years.
Wow.
Because of the exchange rate.
Yeah.
So I'm not an economist, but I think maybe inflation is... See, I think there's some economist is going to be like, no, inflation is good and it's bad. I just see
Yeah,
the consequences.
they do say that, yeah.
Yeah, I just see the consequences. I'm like, okay, now lemons went from 99 cents to $1.19.
Yep.
That is inflation right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Okay, so second one, immigration. Is there, like, I know there's talk here in Canada, definitely the US with their border. In Pakistan, is there any, like, controversy with immigration? I know that Pakistan and India don't have the best relationship. Is immigration an issue there?
Moving to Pakistan or moving out of Pakistan?
Moving to.
No one wants to move to Pakistan. That's the thing.
Interesting.
But
why not? Why not?
Just the state of Pakistan. But like more serious answer, like Afghanistan is a neighboring country, so
Got it.
there are a lot of like Afghani refugees that try to come to Pakistan, and in recent years it's been very, very difficult for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's an issue everywhere, and it also just stems from like Pakistan's a developing country. I'm not sure if it's still developing, but but it's they can't support their own population. So having refugees come in, having immigrants come in, I understand that it a lot of people might get upset about it. I don't think it's justified. I do think that they should be allowed to come in, and just yeah.
Interesting, yeah. Because once again, similar thing with the States, like as the Americans here are saying, that's number two. And what I found interesting is that normally it would only be those southern states that cared about immigration, like Texas, Arizona, California, that kind of thing, because that's where the border is. That's where they're coming in through. But like governors are taking them, and like I know the Florida governor like bust a bunch of them up to Massachusetts, and some of them have gone to New York. And now like the whole country's like, whoa, because normally New Yorkers wouldn't care about immigration. They're far from the border. But since these governors are like, we're not going to be the only ones dealing with this immigration problem. And once again, now New Yorkers are like, okay, we realize now like we can't necessarily let a bunch of people in it when the facilities aren't even here to support them. So it's it's tough.
Look at Canada. I think at the start of my university experience, it was a lot more open. And now I look online, like what's that Instagram account, Toronto Culture, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
You'll go into the comments when they post like a video from like Yonge and Dundas Square, and it's a bunch of like brown people dancing.
Yeah.
And all the comments are like, oh, go home and like go back to your country. Like, oh my God, Yonge and Dundas Square is like India now. Yeah, I think that is a very good like example, like local example of a lot of people's thoughts on immigration, but I don't necessarily agree with. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. And it's also interesting how like I feel like economics, I'm going to say this obviously, I'm an economics student, but I honestly think that like economics and like the first number one consideration there was prices and inflation and money. And I think when money is the issue, then people are like externalizing and they're trying to like, what's the reason? And they take it out on immigrants, for example. Whereas if you had immigration coming in at a more reasonable rate, let's say, where everyone could get their own house and it wasn't an issue of like homelessness and all this type of thing, no one would be like upset about Yonge and Dundas Square because their money's fine. It's only because now they can't afford a house that
Yeah.
they're like, I need to find someone to blame, and they take it out on people that show up here. So it's interesting topic. Healthcare is not an issue for Canadians, really. Maybe I shouldn't necessarily say that. Some people find the system here slow, which is fair because it's free. Obviously, that means the time's going to be different. Whereas in the U.S., you don't need to wait long. You can get healthcare right away. But if you don't have the money, then it's a bit more of an issue. So, like, what are your thoughts on healthcare in the States? What do you think about that system? Do you think it should be? Do you think Canada has it better or the U.S.?
Healthcare should be free, so I'm on Team Canada for this. Yeah, I mean, I've had to wait in the ER for like 7 hours when I desperately needed like medical attention, but I mean, most people cannot afford medical care in the U.S. I think it's just like, it's crazy, the prices. So, yeah, I don't know. I maybe investing more into medical schools here in Canada at least, to allow more students to, because it's so competitive and there's so few spaces, there's so few doctors. I think that's the main problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Number 4 was jobs and the economy. Very similar to inflation and prices. And basically, as I was saying before, it's like when people's money is tight, everything else is an issue. And they try to find what's the reason. And I think, like, it's hard to say. Like, a lot of people, when they think of what's the job of the president, what's the job of the prime minister, and from my experience, at least, I know that conservative-minded people say they need to manage the economy, they need to manage the money. If you have the money right, everything else will fall into place. Whereas more liberal people I speak to consider the social issues more. And if the social issues are fixed, then people feel at peace within their culture, then they'll be happy to work and the economy will fall into place. It's two different perspectives there. So I think that they are linked. And like, even just take these candidates in the US right now, I think Trump is definitely more focused on let's fix the economy, and then the social issues will be good. People won't be blaming immigrants for no jobs because there will be jobs. And Kamala more the opposite from what I've seen. She's like, let's focus more on social problems, and once we do that, then things should be getting better. But yeah, number 5 was abortion. So this is one of the things you mentioned as like something you're interested in. What do you think about, I don't really know the abortion laws in Canada, honestly. I maybe should look into it, but
They're not, there aren't any really. Abortion isn't protected or illegal, so yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So yeah, in the States, I think the issue that they're pushing Trump with is that he returned the abortion, like the decision on abortion to the states. So each state gets to decide, whereas Kamala wants it to be federal so that the whole country has the same rights. What do you think about that?
Well, I think I actually read something the other day. It was like a news line about how doctors were confused, and I don't even remember what state it was, but doctors were confused about what they could do for this pregnant patient who was pregnant, but also could have died if she gave birth. So they couldn't administer an abortion, and they just didn't know what to do because they couldn't deliver the baby, but they couldn't administer an abortion. So, I mean, my thoughts are just, don't make abortions illegal, and that shouldn't be up to the government at all. Like, why would it be?
Yeah.
In my head, it's just, why is that a government decision?
It's interesting.
Yeah,
it's definitely interesting to think about. When I was in high school, I talked more about abortion because I was like I feel like in high school, at least for me, it was when I got more into politics and I'm like having opinions on a bunch of stuff and whatever. I don't think about abortion really at all anymore because, well, obviously I'm a dude. And you can also, like, I feel like if you say it's a woman's choice, as a man, you technically also have the choice of like not having sex with a woman, because like if she is going to get an abortion, if she gets pregnant, like this is once again sensitive topics, but I just know for me, I wouldn't want my child to be aborted. So the responsibility for myself as a man is to not engage in those relationships with women who believe in that. So it's not about saying women shouldn't be allowed to have abortions, but if you don't think that, if you as a man don't want your child to be aborted, then just don't be in a relationship with that girl. Just be in a relationship with a girl who is not going to get an abortion. I think that's the man's choice. Like that's where he gets to kind of have his say instead of trying to bring it to the government. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. In an ideal world, everyone would discuss like their values and political thoughts on abortion before engaging in sex, but since that doesn't happen, I think it's just up to the woman. And I mean, we can disagree. I'm sure there's lots of people that will disagree with this, with what I'm saying, but I think it's just up to the woman, because the woman's the one whose body is changing, who has to go through that procedure, who has to go through 9 months of carrying a child in her body. Or I don't know if I want a fetus in her body. I don't want to call it a child. But
you draw the line there?
Yeah.
That's for the people. I think that's the main point of like controversy.
Yeah.
If everyone agreed on whether it was a baby or not, abortion would not be like a problem that people debated. I think it's because the people who are pro-life, pro-choice.
Pro-life, pro-choice, yeah.
Yeah. The people who are pro-life obviously believe it's a baby, and the people who are pro-choice don't, which is interesting because like obviously if it's not a baby, then there's no problem aborting it. If it is a baby, now there's a huge problem aborting it. So you understand both sides. I think the main point is just, is it a baby? Is it not a baby? Mm-hmm. It's interesting to say. A lot of controversy on that one, and that one obviously is. I'm surprised it's at number 5 because how many? What is the concern? Because I don't know if the concern is like for women. Is it if I get pregnant, I want to be able to get an abortion? Is that the concern, or is it if other people want to have an abortion, they should be allowed to?
I think I'm not sure if it's either. I think it's just that why should someone other than myself have a say in what I do with my body? It's the argument of autonomy, I think. But it is also about, protecting yourself and also protecting other people. Yeah.
Nice. This has been a great discussion. Mm-hmm. I appreciate you coming here. And I appreciate your patience as well for sticking out through the whole summer and still coming instead of just blowing me off and being like, F you, Carter. I don't want to do your podcast because you took too long to get back to me. Do you have any final thoughts for the people at home, for the audience? If you'd like to share, the floor is yours. Anything you'd like to plug to?
I know I'm on Voices of Vic, but if you're a Woodsworth student, or even if you're not a Woodsworth student, you can come to our WIXA events. And then I hope you enjoyed the podcast. And if I was running for U.S. presidential election, I hope you would elect me. Yeah.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Haadiya Usman. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. I don't know when this is going to come out. I'm sorry. But if you're watching, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed. And we will see you next Sunday, Voices of Vic. Peace out.
Yay.
Awesome.